Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. So in this video I would like to share with all of you regarding this new topic which is on process and procedure, and we are going to focus on SOP or standard operating procedure. So this is no longer something new for all of you because since 2019, okay, and because of COVID-19, it is totally common to all of us. So SOP or standard operating procedure is actually not a new word for us, but since that you are taking UHL 2452 English for vocational purposes, we are going to look at SOP in the context of technical approach. Alright, so as I have told you, you need to watch the video in Kalam on why do we need to have SOP. And after you have watched the video or the clip, okay, you need to discuss the importance of having SOP. So why SOP is very important. Okay, we can look at it from two different viewpoints. Number one is in terms of safety. The other one will be on cost. Okay, or maybe there are other reasons why do we need to have the SOP. Okay, number two, which is going to be the best way to follow a certain procedure. Okay, because sometimes you may have more than one option when you are talking about standard operating procedure. So maybe you can go for method A, or method B, or method C. So it depends on the situation that you are looking at, okay? And after that, you're going to decide which one is going to be the most suitable or applicable according to the situation, okay? And then lastly, after you have watched the video, you need to consider what needs to be in an SOP and why you need to have it, okay? For example, nowadays people prefer graphic, okay, or graphics or images. So in terms of SOP, you can have graphics and images plus instructions so that the command can be clearer and you can understand about it better. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So what is it about SOP actually? Okay, so we are going to look in the general definition for SOP. So SOP is actually a document which describes the operations of a certain work or job in order to ensure its quality. So number one over here, why do we need to have SOP is to maintain the quality of the work or the production. So since that we have the word document here, you may know by now that it is actually a written document, okay? All right, so SOP is actually a set of compulsory instructions or systems or procedures or steps, okay, which is written so that other individuals can follow to complete the job safely, okay? So as I have mentioned to you, it must be written, okay, and it is in the form of document, okay? So SOP is not only for you who will be performing the job, but it is also suitable for other people who will be doing the same thing as what you are doing at that moment. Okay, all right. So we talk about safety before this. Why do we need to have SOP? So if you have the SOP and you prepare it for somebody else, okay, it is hoped that by following the SOP, the other individuals can complete the job safely. Okay, so you are looking at safety issues over there. Okay, so SOP also maximizes operational and production requirements. So for example, here we are talking about cost effective. So let's say if you didn't follow the SOP, you may, okay, your company or the company that you are working with may may have to put more capitals or financial implication because you are not following the correct procedure. But if you follow that certain SOP or the one being set, okay, it is believed that it can be cost effective and it will help the company to produce more and with the minimum requirement of capital. Alright, so the purpose of a SOP is to carry out the operations correctly and always in the same manner. Alright, so let's say if you are thinking or if you are talking about replacing a flat tire or a punctured tire, so there will be certain steps that you need to follow to do or to perform the task. And if you change it, it will not be feasible. I mean, like, it is not applicable. So that is the reason why SOP is there, so that you need to follow it and you can perform the task. Even though it happens many times, you can still perform it correctly. Okay. Right, a SOP should be available at the place where the work is performed. Okay, so it must be at the work site. Okay, right, the original should be kept at the secured place, while working copies should be authenticated with stamps and or signatures of authorized persons. Okay, right, so let's say this is the SOP. Okay, you can have 2 copies of it. The first copy is going to be maybe at the admin office. The other copy is going to be at the workplace. And the one that you put or you keep at the workplace should be stamped. Okay? Or in this context, authenticated. What is stamped? Normally, you say chop. For example, sir, could you please chop my document? And it is actually wrong to say so because chop means you are asking me to take the knife and cut the paper or the document that you gave to me. So chop, it is not suitable. So in the future, you need to use the word stamp. Okay? Alright, so when you stamped or you sign the SOP, it means that it is authenticated copy of the original one kept in the administration office, for example. Alright, so there are 2 types of SOP. Number 1 is technical SOP. Number 2 is administrative SOP. So let's have a look at administrative SOP first. It highlights on the administrative processes such as reviewing contract documentation and determining organizational training needs. So in this context, when you are talking about administrative processes or management issues, you are actually looking at administrative SOP. The one that we are focusing in UHL 2452, English for vocational purposes, will be on technical SOP. Why? Because it focuses more on technical activities, such as number 1, how to collect a laboratory sample and how to fix the R2 engine, number 2. Okay, so it is not only limited to these examples, okay, it can be more. And since that we are doing on vocational purposes, okay, language or learning the English language in terms of vocational purposes, we are focusing on technical SOP. Alright, the format of technical SOP. Right, the format and length of SOP depend on the steps that are taken to describe the procedures of the work. So it means that it can be from 1 page up to 2 to 3 pages or maybe more. How is it going to be? Because it depends on the number of steps that is required or that are required to perform the task. Okay, all right, so it can include a simple one-page hierarchical steps. Okay, so this is one type of technical SOP. Graphic procedures such as flowchart. Okay, over here we have two actually. So this is two, or the second type of technical SOP, and even a few pages of procedural process. So flowchart over here will be number 3. So basically there are 3 types of technical SOP that you are going to learn for this course. An organization will have its own format for SOP, and you can follow the following format as a guide to write your technical SOP. So as I have told you, right, it is going to be a bit tacky in the sense that, all right, what you are learning for UHL 2452, okay, 2452 will be a bit different from the one that you're going to do later in terms of the template. So just to share with you, we had a discussion with people from the industry before, and one of them was from Mercedes-Benz Pekan. Okay, and the person or the representative shared with us the template of the standard operating procedure at the workplace. So the template will be different, so it is not a surprise, just to let you know. Okay, don't get confused, but the contents and how you arrange the information will still be the same. So what we are teaching you now for UHL 2452 is to equip you with the right or with the correct organization and how you can put the contents accordingly in the template later on, the template of the SOP. So if you're working with company A, maybe they have their own template. If you're working with company B, the template will be different from company A. Okay, so it is not a surprise, so do not get confused. It is actually the same, especially in terms of contents and management or arrangement of the information. So SOP can be written by individuals, okay, or a team. So if you are doing it alone, so you can prepare or you can write the SOP, or if you are working in a team, you can also prepare the SOP. For example, here we have shutting down an operation or a plant. Okay, so when you want to shut down the plant, you need to follow the SOP. What do you need to do from the first step until the last step? Okay, all right, repairing a faulty electrical circuit. Okay, so let's say if you want to replace a faulty circuit, okay, or board. So what do we need to do? Do you just simply unscrew it from the frame and take it out? Or you have to make sure that you switch off the main power or main supply of the electricity first, and then there are other additional steps that you need to do before you can perform the task? Or you just leave it just like that? So SOP is actually helping you to make sure that you can follow or you can perform the task accordingly or correctly. So basic milking process over here, let's say you own a farm and you have cows. So you want to extract the milk, so SOP will help you on milking process, okay, if it is new for you. And lastly, SOP can also help you to build a new machine. So here are just 4 examples, but actually when we are talking about SOP, it is going to be more diverse. Right. So who should write SOP? So people who will perform or people who has performed the job. Okay. So let's say if you are working with company A and there is no standard operating procedure yet for the production line. So you will be performing the task, and since that there is no SOP yet, so you will create it. Or somehow there is no SOP or no standard operating procedure yet, okay, but you know the flow of the process and you has performed the job, then you are going to create the standard operating procedure so that the others who will be doing the same task as you can follow the SOP. Right, other than that, people who work together on a job, for example, like the engineers, technicians, maintenance, or equipment personnel, can also create the SOP. So you are going to work together, and since that you are working on the same procedure or process, for example, then you as a team, you can create or write the SOP. Okay, number 3 here, people who supervise other people doing the job. So let's say if you want to make sure that that particular subordinate of you are doing or performing the task correctly, meaning that you are supervising his or her job, then to make sure that they are following the correct procedure or process, you need to write the SOP. Number 4, safety and health officer. We are talking about rules and regulations. So there are certain rules and regulations needed, especially, or for example, you are talking about waste disposal. So when they created or when they wrote the SOP, this is to ensure that these rules and regulations are being followed. Okay. Lastly, technical writers, for example, they need to write the SOP if in the form of manual, and since that it is required for each product or processes, so people will read the manual and follow the instructions. So that is going to be one of the examples for technical writers to write SOP. Another one will be in the form of review or feedback. So when they write or when they wrote on the review or the feedback of a product or a procedure, for example, it is actually meant for the others who are reading it to follow the same instructions. So who is SOP for? It is going to be useful for the person who will perform a particular job. So since that you're going to start working later on or in the future, SOP will be helpful for you in performing a particular job, such as managers, in terms of administrative part, engineers and planners in terms of technical issues, safety officers and environmental regulators, we are talking about rules and regulations, company representatives, for example, like what you have done in your first assessment, whereby you are presenting about the latest product created by your company and you use the SOP so that you can explain to the others about it clearly. And lastly, anybody performing the work. So basically, these are the people who will be using the SOP. So when to write and test SOP? So you need to write and test it before a job is begun. So before you start doing the work, you need to write and test it whether it is correct or not. As I have told you earlier, maybe you are going to have 3 different methods, for example. And after you have used each of the method over here, and you found out that method C is the most suitable procedure to perform the task, while method A and method B will not be suitable. Then you need to test the SOP before putting it into final application. So C is going to be the most suitable, for example, the method, and you need to test it again before it comes into a documentation. Next, you need to revise it after a trial of the job is performed. So maybe after you have used method C, you need to do some amendment, or correction, or improvisation to the process or procedure so that people can do it better next time. You can also revise the SOP when there is any change to the process or even equipment use. For example, okay, in your company, they are using machine A. After a while, the company decided to buy a new machine, let's say machine B, and thus the process and procedures, okay, for manufacturing, for instance, okay, will be a bit different. Because of this thing, you need to change or you need to revise your existing SOP because you are using different machine by now. Okay, you need to rewrite it when new information indicates new process. Right, so maybe you have step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 previously. Somehow, when you have a new machine, let's say machine B, and you have step 3A and step 3B in between step 3 and 4. So because of this additional new information, so there will be new processes involved, then you have to write back a new SOP. Okay, you need to also rewrite it when new information suggests new performance. For instance, okay, if you use method C before this, you will get number 1 or I. If you're using the same method but because of different raw materials, for example, so you're going to get a new outcome, which is number 2. Then you have to write back your SOP. Okay, and lastly, you need to update it regularly based on internal and external factors. So what will be the internal factors? For example, you are buying a new machine. Then you need to update your SOP. External factors, for example, you have been taking the raw materials from supplier A. Then somehow, you need to buy the raw materials from a new supplier. Even though the materials will be about the same, perhaps, okay, there are certain other things being added to the raw materials, and because of that, you need to update the SOP. So, in order to write SOP effectively, you need to use number 1, short sentences. Why? Because long sentences are harder to understand and tend to include more than one step. So say no to long sentences, instead use short one. Because short sentences will be easier to understand. Number 2, use imperative instead of passive voice. Because imperatives, as I have mentioned in our first assessment, imperatives is going to be command and it will be easier to understand. Let's have a look at the example in the next slide. So this is the passive form of the sentence. The weight of feed refusals should be recorded in the feeder notebook. When you change it to imperative, you're going to say it like this: record the weight of feed refusals in the feeder notebook. Notice that the word record here acts as an action verb. So therefore, use imperative other or instead of using passive form when you are writing the SOP. Number 3, make sure that the words being used is concise. So write in a few words as possible. Make sure it is short but direct so that readers can quickly understand and memorize the steps. For example, if you are going to replace a flat tire, perhaps, okay, you're going to give simple instructions. Number 1, switch off the engine. So people know by now the first step that they need to do before replacing the flat tire is to switch off the engine. Number 2, pull the handbrake. Okay, for example. Alright, so make sure that the words that you are using are concise according to the context. Alright, so we are now in the last slide. So for further information or example of SOP, you can click on this link and then you can have your further readings about it. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum and goodbye.